Hey, I'm Brad from Fix This Build That. Today, I'm going to show you how to make this awesome grilling and chilling station.
I started the build with the top frame. The frame is just 2 long pieces the length of the cart and 3 pieces the width of the cooler. I drilled pocket holes in the underside of the short pieces to attach the frame together. To position the middle piece, I secured one side and then put the cooler into position. I butted up the piece and drew a reference mark on the boards. Then I screwed the rest of the frame together with pocket screws. Next, I cut the boards to size for the legs. The legs are 38¼ inches long, for a total height of 39 inches when the top is added. Each leg is made from one full-size 1x4 and one ripped down to 2 3/4. This will give the leg the same width when viewed from the front or the side. I used pocket holes, glue, and clamps to assemble the legs. The pocket holes were drilled only where the wood would be covered by the body of the cart or the lower shelf. In the open space between the holes, I used clamps to hold the legs tight while the glue dried. Next, I cut the boards for the front, back, and sides of the cart. The front and back each need 4 long cladding boards at 44½ inches. The sides are cut at 16½ inches long and also need 4 boards per side. I wanted to add a little detail to the body of the cart, so I used a chamfer bit in my trim router and put a 1/16 inch 45-degree chamfer on the edge of all the cladding boards. When assembled together, they'll have a nice beadboard look, and this will also help hide the gaps when the boards expand and contract with humidity. After the glue was dry on the legs, I took them out of the clamps and laid out the pieces to assemble the sides. I put glue on the legs and tacked the side cladding in place with a brad nailer. Then I came back and pre-drilled and screwed the pieces together with 1 1/4 inch screws. I joined the sides together with the front and the back cladding. I used the same method as I did on the sides. Glue, tack with brad nails, pre-drill, and secure with 1 1/4 inch screws. To prepare for attaching the top later, I used a combination of pocket holes and cleats. I put pocket holes in the cooler cavity where they wouldn't be seen, and I used 3 cleats in the storage bay. The cleats are 3/4 by 3/4 and were pre-drilled before install. I left a space on each corner of the storage bay where the tabs to hold the lid will go. After attaching the cleats for the top, I installed cleats for the wall that separates the cooler and the storage bay. I put them 18 inches from the right side of the cart and on both the front and the back. These also help align and strengthen the front and the back panels. Next, I cut 4 boards to 15 inches long for the storage cavity wall. I attached them into the cleats with 1 1/4 inch screws and glue. Screws are probably a little overkill here, and you could just as easily get away with attaching them with glue and brad nails. For the bottom of the storage bay, I used another pair of cleats. I put the cleats on the front and the back, 3/4 inch up from the bottom. Installing the boards flush with the bottom gave me the maximum capacity in the storage bay. I cut 5 15-inch boards and screwed them into the cleats from underneath. I had to trim the width of the center board to fit the opening. With the storage bay all buttoned up, I aligned and attached the top, using the cleats on the right and 1 1/4 inch screws and pocket holes over in the cooler bay. I also used a good amount of glue all along the top edge. Next up, I made the lower shelf. I used 2 46-inch long strips, 1 inch wide, and 11 16½ inch boards. To make sure I had even spacing, I started with the outer boards and secured them to the strips. Then I secured the middle board. From there, I could just fill in between, and I used a 3/4 inch spacer, making slight adjustments as needed to make sure the gap stayed consistent. You can probably see why I went with brad nails instead of screws. That took a while. Before starting on the lids, I installed the cooler into place. The handles of my cooler butted up against the top, so I just turned the cart upside down and held 3 15-inch boards tight against the cooler bottom. I secured them to the front and the back with 1 1/4 inch pocket hole screws. After loading it up, I can tell this is plenty of support. I made the lid for the storage area first. This lid will sit flush with no handle or hinges, so I put a 1-inch hole in the first board for a little finger hold. I also chamfered the edges for a nice smooth feel. The lid is made from 4 15 3/4 inch boards. They're held together by 2 battens from underneath that are glued and screwed to the underside. I also used the same chamfer treatment on the top of these boards to make sure it had a nice detail and matched the front. I'm not using any hinges for the lid, so I made some small tabs to mount to the underside of the top. They're just little 1.5 by 2 inch blocks with a rounded corner. I attached them into the spaces I left earlier when I was installing the cleats for the top. I just used glue and a couple brad nails, and that'll hold plenty of weight for what I need it to. Alright, I've got everything assembled now. Let's see how it fits. I believe, like Ace Ventura says, like a glove. I wanted a super clean look for the top with no screws or nail holes showing. So I built a frame around the lid as tall as the lid plus 3/4 of an inch and joined it with pocket holes on the inside. Then I cut 3 cleats to go along the lid and installed them on the frame with pocket holes as well. I cut 5 boards for the top, trimming the width of the center board to fit the frame. I used super glue to temporarily attach the boards where I wanted, leaving the center board unattached. Then I flipped the frame over and screwed the boards to the cleats from underneath for a solid connection. I put the top back on and secured the cooler lid to the wood frame with 1 1/4 inch screw through the outer cleats into the lid. Then I attached the centerpiece in place with some super glue and some wood glue. The super glue will hold tight fast, and the wood glue will have a more permanent bond as it dries. It took a while to figure this one out, but I'm really happy with how it turned out. It's like watching glue dry. The drain hardware was the last thing to go on before applying the finish. I used 1/2 inch PVC and 2 male adapters to make the connection between the cooler and the hose bib. I cut a small block for mounting the hose bib and glued it in place with clamping pressure from the fittings. I applied a thick coat of spar urethane to all the parts with a sponge brush. Then I came back and wiped on 2 coats of a 2-to-1 spar to mineral spirits mixture. The cart will be under my porch and it won't be getting any direct weather. If it would be out in the elements, I probably would have added more full-strength coats. I left the lower shelf off to make finishing a little bit easier. I went back and attached the shelf 2.5 inches up off the ground and attached it with 2 screws into each leg. Doing it the way I did was a little awkward. I should have just turned the unit upside down instead of trying to do it while laying on its back. The last piece was to add the hardware. I installed 3-inch utility hinges on the top, 3 inches from the outside. I added a handle on the front lid and a bottle opener on the leg next to the cooler. I ended up adding 2 hooks later on the other side for grill tools as well. You'll see those in the final photos. We get the lid on here for the chilling part. We got the grilling stage inside. I have got some inserts that go on my grill. They fit in here. I actually have 4 different inserts that fit in here. I'll give you a close-up of what that looks like. This is going to be a great addition to my back deck, and I can't wait to put this thing into use. That's going to wrap it up today. You can find plans for the build down below, as well as a link to subscribe. I'd love to have you as part of the channel. Until next time, get out there and build something awesome. Cheers. Root beer's good.